The story of this film begins with a man named Paddy Conlon. As part of his usual routine, he goes to church, and after the ceremony, he heads home while listening to his favorite podcast. Upon getting out of his car, he notices a stranger standing in front of his house. The stranger turns out to be his youngest son, Tom, who has returned home after 14 years. Paddy is surprised and asks for the reason behind this unexpected visit. But Tom avoids telling the truth and claims he's only there to check on his father's health. Tom hasn't come empty-handed. He's brought a bottle of his father's favorite brand of liquor to share a drink together. However, Paddy explains that he's on his 1,000th day of sobriety and sees no reason to break his streak. Tom looks around the house and realizes that his father has been living alone for years and never remarried after his mother passed away. He glances at the framed photos on the mantelpiece, and Paddy explains that his older brother, Brendanard, along with his wife, Tess, now has 2 beautiful children. Tom is furious about his father's past because Paddy was an alcoholic who used to physically abuse his mother. Now, 14 years later, Tom's mother has passed away, and it's far too late to make amends. The weight of these events was too much for them to bear, so Tom's mother decided to escape with her youngest son. Tom recounts the hardships of their escape to make his father feel guilty. Despite their attempt to flee, Paddy hadn't given up and had sent someone to track them. Tom repeatedly mocks his father for the suffering he caused and reminds him that even his sobriety cannot erase his guilt and regret. Tom reveals that he had to care for his sick mother in her final days and witnessed her death, which deeply upsets Paddy. In a moment of vulnerability, Tom confesses that he actually preferred his father when he was drunk over his current sober but seemingly useless self, who has done nothing for his family. After this confession, Tom collapses from exhaustion, leaving Paddy alone with his thoughts. The next day, in another part of the city, Brendanard is celebrating his daughter's birthday, while Tess is capturing these beautiful moments with her camera. Later, when it's time to open presents, Tess warns Brendanard about an expensive gift that exceeds their family budget. However, Brendanard insists on making his daughter's birthdays special and memorable. After the party, both of them quickly return to their daily routines. Tess promises her husband that after finishing her work meeting that evening, she'll join him for a romantic night. She also asks him not to do anything foolish in her absence, and to make sure he picks up their daughters after work. It's worth mentioning that Brendanard and Tom are brothers, and their father Paddy was a former wrestling champion. Paddy trained his children relentlessly, shaping them into true fighters. Unfortunately, an accident in the wrestling world prevented Paddy from reaching the greatness he deserved. After that incident, he started intense training sessions with his sons, but his descent into alcoholism ultimately shattered their family. This is why Tom constantly mocks his father, even after 14 years. Back to the main story. After waking up, Tom heads straight to a boxing gym near his father's house. The receptionist is watching the news, where commentators are discussing a new combat sport called UFC or MMA. Tom asks about the registration conditions at the gym and expresses his interest in joining. While filling out the registration form, Tom notices an advertisement for the Sparta tournament. Meanwhile, Brendanard is teaching his physics class and passionately explains one of Newton's laws through a hands-on demonstration. His teaching style is engaging and exciting. Back at the gym, Tom starts training immediately, punching the heavy bag with such intensity that it seems like he's blaming it for ruining his life. His hatred is evident in every strike. The gym's professionals and veterans watch their best fighter spar with an amateur. After knocking out his sparring partner, the manager and coach, Mad Dog, struggles to find another training partner willing to risk their safety for $500. Tom seizes the opportunity and suggests becoming the fighter's sparring partner for just $200. Mad Dog initially mocks Tom, but eventually agrees. I won't say anything more and leave you to watch the intense sparring session, which looks more like a full-fledged fight. Yes, this is exactly what Tom did to the middleweight champion of the world before calmly walking out of the ring.
You owe me $200.
Apparently, Brendanard is going through a financially difficult time. His financial advisor at the bank recommends that, considering the numbers in his file and the amount of debt he owes, along with the delays in loan repayments, he must settle his debt within the next 90 days. Otherwise, the bank will have no choice but to seize their home as compensation after declaring Brendanord bankrupt. Brendanord pleads for more time and explains that both he and his wife are working 3 shifts, yet they still cannot keep up with the expenses. Unfortunately, Brendanord's situation is extremely critical, and the bank cannot offer him more than 90 days to repay the debt. The primary reason for this debt is his eldest daughter's heart surgery, which incurred significant expenses. Patty is watching videos of Tom's matches from when he was 5 years old, where he was considered a prodigy. He was trained by his well-respected father. Watching these memories seems to make Patty's daily meal far more enjoyable. Mad Dog, the gym owner and trainer, visits the Conlin household. After speaking with Patty, Mad Dog reveals that he found Tom's address through his registration file. Mad Dog mentions that Tom defeated the gym's #1 fighter and the middleweight world champion earlier that day, and he wants to learn more about him. Patty doesn't provide any additional information and simply says that Tom doesn't live there before closing the door. Brendanord heads to his second job. He has told his family that his second job involves commentary for mixed martial arts tournaments. In reality, however, he is preparing to step into the cage as the next fighter. These underground matches are held in 3 5-minute rounds, and Brendanord faces a tough opponent. The fight begins at the referee's signal, and after enduring a few heavy hits, Brendanord manages to defeat his opponent in the first round and wins the fight. Afterward, he quietly enters the house and heads to his room. Tess notices Brendan and approaches him. Upon seeing her husband's bruised face, Brendanord is forced to confess the truth. He explains that he is not a club commentator and, due to the low pay, decided to return to fighting to earn real money. Tess honestly doesn't care about the money. She doesn't want to see her husband being carried away in an ambulance with his face smashed again. Brendanord admits that the bank will seize their home in 90 days, and he feels he has no choice but to fight. Tess, however, doesn't want her children to grow up in a family where their father earns money by beating or being beaten by other people. Brendanord insists on saving their home, and Tess has no choice but to support him. Tom goes to a cafeteria and speaks with Patty. He tells his father that he plans to return to the cage. A major tournament is starting soon, where 16 of the best middleweight mixed martial artists will compete. The winner will take home an enormous cash prize. Tom explains that he wants to participate in this tournament and needs a coach. He asks Patty to train him again, just like in the past. But this time, he doesn't want a single unnecessary word spoken during training. Tom emphasizes that this partnership holds no deeper meaning and that a tall wall still exists between them. Finally, Patty agrees but sets a condition. Tom must immediately give up any addictions he has and hand over his tranquilizers. At school, Brendanord's students are discussing him because one of them found out through their brother that their teacher participated in underground boxing matches. Seeing Brendanord's bruised face confirms their suspicions, and the news spreads quickly among the students. The school principal summons Brendanord and explains that they cannot allow a teacher involved in violent fighting to continue working with students. Unfortunately, a school board visitor is also present that day, waiting to confront Brendan. The principal assures him that he will try his best to resolve the situation, but cannot promise that Brendanord will keep his teaching position.
UFC? Yeah.
Brendanord returns home, and while repairing his daughter's piano, he receives an email from the school. It states that due to recent events, Brendanord is suspended from teaching for the next semester without pay, pending further review of his case. Hearing this, Brendanord explains to Tess that he plans to participate in a tournament held across various cities. The prize money for these fights is substantial, and he hopes to use the 90 days to earn enough money to settle their debt. Tess remains worried, but Brendanord reassures her that his opponents are just a bunch of amateurs who can't pose a real threat. The next morning, Patty visits Tom to prepare him for training. Tom, irritated by Patty treating him like a child, asks his father to leave the room. Meanwhile, at the military base, one of Tom's former comrades, Giller, watches a video of Tom's fight with Mad Dog on YouTube. He quickly searches through archived military operation footage and compares them to confirm that the man in the boxing gym is indeed the same brave soldier who once served in the United States military. Brendanerd goes to his close friend Frank's boxing gym. After exchanging pleasantries, Brendanerd explains that, given the bank's threats to seize his home, he wants to resume boxing training and return to the cage. Frank urges him to be realistic and aware of the dangers of this sport, as he might suffer even more severe injuries than in the past. However, Brendanerd is determined and feels he has no choice but to go through with it, because underground fights are the only way he knows to earn the money he needs. Frank reluctantly agrees to train Brendanerd alongside his other students, but he makes it clear that he can't offer him anything more than that. It's evident that Frank doesn't want to give Brendanerd false hope. After returning from the gym, Brendanerd encounters his father, who has come near their home.